Hi, it's Lerald, and in this video I'm going to talk about Tier 17 maps. This is aimed specifically at helping players who are trying to get Tier 17s completed for their 6th map device slot, or achievements or challenges or whatever they call them, and that sort of thing, and less toward currency farming and high-end juicing, but, you know, that's definitely still a thing you can and should do in Tier 17, so I am going to mention it for sure. So let's get into it, but first don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this video or find it helpful and you want to see more like it. So first off, Tier 17 maps are still very hard. GGG did nerf monsters' life and damage with patch 3.25, but they didn't fix the real reason that Tier 17s have been such a pain in the ass since Necropolis League: the Tier 17 map mods. There are a ton of Tier 17 map mods that are horrible, build disabling, just nightmare map mods, but the ones that really stand out for me as being the worst are Marked for Death, the Maven Annoys players, Bloodstained Sawblades, and Rare Monsters Have Volatile Cores. Those four really are just straight from the depths of hell. I really can't believe they kept the cores in the game. Do not run maps that have volatile cores, you will have a bad time. Now as for the other three, you can do Maven Harassment maps if your build can completely prevent enemies from healing. Usually that would just mean playing an occultist. But if you're not, she will permanently maintain her heal on map bosses. Even if you do prevent the heal, she will still constantly spam her voice lines, so it's very annoying. I do not recommend doing it, even if you can immune it. Marked for Death is, I think, generally considered the worst map mod ever. It prevents all life and energy shield recovery for 10 seconds after you kill a rare, except the duration is increased by map mod effect, so it's more like 30 seconds or so. You basically just can't heal at all. It's maybe the worst thing I've ever seen in a video game, and I've played like 45,000 hours of World of Warcraft, so I know a thing or two about scraping the bottom of the barrel of bad game design. And then finally, the Sawblades just hit really hard, and they're the Sawblades from Ultimatum. They hurt. There's not really anything special about them. They deny a lot of area in what are already some pretty cramped boss fights, and they will kill you. Now, there are obviously tons of other awful mods designed to eat dozens, if not hundreds, of Chaos Orbs, things that prevent generating charges, things that remove all of your defenses, minus a billion max all res, tons of horrible things, but they're not all equally bad against all builds like those four are. Additionally, they took the Revenant monsters that were previously only in Abomination map and could be replaced with the All Flame Embers and made them available in all of the maps. These are the guys that spam Enhanced Corpse Explosion, and yeah, they can be in any Tier 17 map if you get lucky. Hooray! Now, since I'm playing a build that uses axes and has the axe mastery that destroys enemy corpses when I kill them, I'm totally fine. Corpses don't exist to be exploded against me, but for any build that's not using that mastery, which is like 99% of builds, you are going to be in hell if the Revenants spawn in your Tier 17 maps. So bottom line, Tier 17s are still not perfect. They can be okay if the mod rolls aren't too bad, but I don't think that they've hit the mark on what they were going for yet, and all four of those mods need to be fed through a wood chipper, along with plenty of others I didn't mention, and the Revenant monsters need to just be sent straight to hell, back from whence they came. Alright, now I'm going to cover some general tips for Tier 17s, and I'll start with a passive tree. Map mod effect is good for juicing, like this is a pretty normal Atlas passive tree for juicing maps. All of this map mod effect up here makes Tier 17s substantially more dangerous, and since they are already the most dangerous content in the game, more so than Uber bosses, that's not a good combo if you're just trying to focus on clearing them successfully. Now, of course, if you are focusing on making currency, then yeah, absolutely, do take all of the map mod effect possible in the passive tree. It will make those maps massively more rewarding. In general, I do try to make a beeline right to the boss and kill it to kind of lock in the value from having gotten the Uber boss fragment from the map, and then finish the rest of the map afterward. Most League mechanics behave normally in Tier 17s, but the layout of Tier 17s is really bad for some of them. Breach and Legion really stand out as just being terrible mechanics in Tier 17 maps. I guess Expedition is also pretty bad in Tier 17s. Most of these mechanics don't really get anything out of being in a Tier 17 other than being more difficult. If you're trying to juice, you really want to use mechanics that focus on adding more guys, Beyond and Delirium kind of stand out as the two leading mechanics for that. And they're also, I think, my two least favorite mechanics in the game, so I'm not doing them, but it makes sense why you would. Ambush is the GOAT strategy right now in Tier 17 map juicing. It is what you do if you're trying to make 100 divines an hour or whatever, but the cost of juicing Ambush, because it is so strong, is really high. Now, Domination Shrines actually get a special mention from me here because while they are powerful bonuses, and I like Domination, they cause huge packs of enemies to gather up all into choke points, and then also give them massive buffs. This can be a serious problem because the layout of all 5 of the Tier 17 maps is long, twisty hallways with tons of dangerous intersections, and even though I like shrines, it can be an extremely dangerous League mechanic to run in Tier 17 maps. I mostly prefer to use scarabs like Monstrous Lineage or Hunted Traders, things that juice pack size or fill in more dudes. Influencing Scarab of Hordes is another one I really like. Also, don't forget to chisel your Tier 17 maps. They do not drop chiseled anymore with quality anymore. That's not a difficulty thing. That's just making them more rewarding type of thing, but you do actually have to click chisels onto your maps now. Don't forget to do that. Now, if you want to reduce the difficulty, like really reduce the difficulty, the obvious thing is to not have any map mod effect in the Atlas passive tree, but there are a couple of scarabs that can help with that even more, and I'll show those off here. One of them is an old scarab, the Scarab of Stability, which just gives your portals a 50% chance to not be consumed when you step into them. This means that you roughly have about 12 portals on average per map. It is RNG, but it is an average of 12 portals, and that means a bigger safety net for clearing through the map. It doesn't actually do anything to make the map easier, though. You just get more lives to go in, and, maybe it doesn't proc at all, or maybe you don't need them. In terms of actually reducing the difficulty, there is a new scarab, Scarab of Bisection, and this here bisexual scarab makes it so that you can choose a map device option called Nullify Prefixes or Nullify Suffixes. It does exactly what it says. It turns those suffixes or prefixes off completely, which means they don't apply, but they also don't give you any buffs. You don't get any of the item quality, item rarity, pack size, or any of the weird Tier 17 unique mods, which also exist and are part of the reason why Tier 17s are so juicy, such as this one right here that says underneath where it says item quantity, item rarity, monster pack size, it also says more currency. I think I have some others, more maps, more scarabs, and those are the things that your Tier 17s can roll with. They can roll with much higher rarity value, a higher pack size value, more currency, more maps, or more scarabs. All three of the more of stuff things can be useful. More currency and scarabs are more generally useful. More maps is really more useful only for specific map farming strategies, in which you try to farm like 50 corrupted 8 mod maps per Tier 17 map, which is very lucrative. I'm a big fan, but it's more of a specific strategy. Ultimately, the Tier 17 map mods are what determine those extra bonus rewards, and it's just kind of RNG what you get. It really does require rolling with a lot of Chaos Orbs to actually get valuable rewards that also correspond to Tier 17 map mods that you're capable of doing. All right, now I just want to quickly talk about Tier 17 map drops and Uber Boss tokens, just to briefly cover them for people who maybe missed Necropolis League and just don't know about this mechanic. Tier 17 map drops are basically just a thing that occurs when a Tier 16 map drops, and it is based off of the number of Void Stones you have. You have a percentage chance per socketed Void Stone to convert your Tier 16 drops into Tier 17s, and then there's some diminishing returns on getting multiple Tier 17s in a single map. I have done it. I've literally done it today. I had 2 Tier 17s drop in a single map, but it's fairly uncommon. You get about a 6.5% chance, 6.4% chance if you have all your Void Stones for all of your Tier 16s to turn into Tier 17s. Now, Tier 17 map drops are specifically based on the map that you are running. For example, if you are running Dunes, your Tier 16 map drops that convert into a Tier 17 will convert into Fortress. Fortress is the most valuable of the Tier 17 maps right now. It has a really good layout. It has a very easy boss, and so it is by far the most expensive right now. Ziggurat has pretty good Uber Boss fragments, and so it is second most. And then, as you can see, Citadel, bad Uber Boss fragments, terrible layout. Not the most beloved boss, and so it is quite a bit down the line here, quite a bit lower in price. So it's almost half the price of Fortress map. Ultimately, if you want to target farm a specific map, you're going to have to then run a specific handful of tier 16 maps in order to do that. Now, the maps that are most beloved by the community generally are Dunes for tier 16 and Fortress for tier 17, so it's kind of nice that they have made Dunes drop Fortress. You know, there are some other okay maps in here, but like Jungle Valley is one that people really like. Jungle Valley drops Abomination. Abomination, kind of mid as a map and kind of mid as a value option, so this is why I don't really love Jungle Valley specifically right now. As for Uber Boss Fragments, any of them can drop from any of the 5 tier 17 bosses. There are 7 Uber Bosses. You need 5 Uber Boss Fragments shoved into the map device all at once in order to spawn that Uber Boss. And you can get any of them from any of the 5 T17 bosses, but they are weighted toward specific bosses. So Abomination and Ziggurat have a much higher chance of dropping the Uber Maven fragment. Uber Maven being by far the most expensive of the fragments. It's over a divine apiece. And that is really the main reason that Ziggurat is as expensive as it is. It's a very long and boring fight, but it drops the most expensive and second most expensive fragments as its highest weight options, along with the Cortex fragment, the one that isn't worth anything. You know, it's like all the way down here, literally worth less than like a fragment of constriction from regular Elder. So, you know, yeah. Ultimately, Ziggurat is the most rewarding boss to kill on average over the course of time, but you can definitely have some bad luck and get Cortex fragments, which I think is actually what happened to me. As the wiki says here, biased fragments have a 40 to 60% drop rate, and non-biased fragments have about a 5 to 10% drop rate. This is very consistent with my experience of doing this. You can get 1 to 3 fragments from a boss. You do have to have a fairly large amount of item quantity in order to guarantee that you will get 2 fragments to drop, and then actually getting up to a third takes a really massive amount of item quantity in the area. Quantity, rather. Alright, now I'm just going to give some tips on killing each of the 5 map bosses and very briefly talk about like kind of running through the 5 maps, and I'm going to run through them in what I think is the order of easiest to hardest. So let's start with Fortress. Fortress is a heist map. It's just a heist layout. It is a bit dangerous as far as maps go because it has explosive barrels scattered around, so you do want to be careful if you're playing with like a build that has Frostblink as a major mobility skill, not to Frostblink into like 6 barrels and die. But overall, it's probably the least bad map overall because the hallways are pretty wide. The boss is just the unbreakable fight from that one unique heist, breaking the unbreakable. And there's not a ton else to say if you're playing a ranged character. It's pretty easy. Circle behind him as he melees and slams and does his overhead slam and combos and all that. Just make sure you're out of melee range for the big frontal orb blast mechanic he does. Don't get hit by the beams. Easy as pie. As melee, you need to stay out of range of the big orb, and that is quite a bit harder, especially if he has any increased AoE mods. It's really quite difficult. You will actually have to leave melee range when he does that. Now, this boss doesn't have any sort of voice lines at all. He's a robot, so there's not really any great sound cues to go off of. You just have to look at him. At 50%, he'll put his arms out to the side and start spinning around in a circle. This is a really dangerous mechanic. You'll need to avoid it. You can blink over the lines if you need to. Again, it's penalizing to melee because he likes to do this big, massive damage circle around himself as well. As soon as he gets his arms out to the side, that circle will pop up, and it's quite a bit larger than you might think, so you actually do need to leave melee range and dodge. It's very annoying. Again, dodge that, then resume the fight, and he is actually pretty easy. Easiest tier 17 boss by a mile, I think, even though he's particularly punishing for melee. Sanctuary is, I think, the second easiest of the bosses. It is a Sanctum map. The layout is okay. It's a little twisty and turny, but like Fortress, it's not super claustrophobic, so I think it is a competitor for least bad map. The boss fight is Uber Lycia, the Sanctum boss. She's not really all that different mechanically from Sanctum. She just fills the room with more stuff to dodge. The staves on the ground are really dangerous, but they only deal damage when they spin, so you can quickly dash through them in between spins as needed. Unlike the boss from Fortress, she does have voice lines for all of her different skills, so you'll want to kind of pay attention to those. Play with your sound on. You know, you wouldn't play with your monitor off. Don't deprive yourself of a sense. And listen for those voice line callouts and then respond to those mechanics accordingly. Be sure to dodge out and then in when she says inevitable and then does the big circle followed by the cascading explosions, and strafe behind her when she says you will know pain and then tries to blast you with a beam. The biggest danger during the intermission is Baydat's arrow, so be sure to dodge right before he finishes the cast. He tracks really, really well with the arrow right until he's about to finish, and then he locks in. You just want to sidestep that, kill Baydat, and then the intermission will end, and the rest of the fight is fairly straightforward. Same fight as it was before, really. Alright, Citadel I think is the third place contender for me. It is the community's least favorite of the Tier 17 maps, and I think that's justifiable. It's a big, long, twisty maze, and very dark and spooky, very annoying place to get, like, wander back and forth in and get caught in all the dead ends. The choke points in this map are absolutely brutal. It's very dangerous and slow to navigate. I really don't love it at all. The boss, on the other hand, is not really that bad. It's a combination of the Gwyn and Rog and Tujin fights from Expedition. The main dangerous mechanics in the fight are the skulls that the main boss will throw out in rapid succession. He will yell, "Futile," and then throw them out, and that's your cue to start dodging. Like Lycia, he has voice callouts on all of his skills, and that's important because his debuff for like hitting you with his skills is reduced action speed, which is very bad, and it stacks. It's really dangerous if you get hit by that multiple times. It completely kills your ability to heal yourself or to dodge the remaining hits of the fight. So the main goal here is just to keep dodging while hitting him. If he spawns fists or hands, grasping hands on the ground, you need to dodge out of that as well. And then once he gets into his intermission phases, you just kill the mini-boss quickly while dodging the lines that are shooting out of the walls. There's a ton of dodging in this fight. Dodge, 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 dodge. But once you do, the biggest danger to watch out really is just the skulls that he throws out when he says futile. As long as you dodge those effectively, the fight is not very punishing numerically. It's just dangerous if you make any mistakes and get hit by any mechanics and then have that debuff on you. With all that being said, I did my first kill of the league on this fight with temp chains and petrification statues, and it was fine. Not a bad boss. Alright, Ziggurat is next. This map is fine. It's just a bunch of square hallways with some Abyss monsters and architecture from Abyss, and I mean, I think it looks cool. I like the map alright. As for the boss, it is Katarina from Betrayal, but the Uber version of that. She brings in all of the different liches from Abyss, and this fight is a real war of attrition. I think this maybe is my least favorite boss fight, even though I like it. Mechanically, it just takes a really long time. There's a lot of immunity phases, and I don't love how long this fight is. Now, it was tuned down from patch 3.24. In doing this fight, the Lich boss that lobbed a bullet hell of green orbs in patch 3.24 no longer seems to do that in 3.25, so I think they removed that mechanic entirely. It was by far the most dangerous part of the fight in Necropolis League. I'm really happy that that was gone. I actually found the fight to be pretty easy in 3.25 after having been, I think, by far the hardest fight in 3.24. It's really not as bad now as it was. The fight space is still very cramped. You need to dodge her frontal projectiles. She'll throw out like a cascade of frontal projectiles. You have to dodge out of those, especially if she has any increased AoE or more projectiles mods on the map. You also need to stay out of the lines that are around the outside of the room. When she summons the baby skeletons to come eat you, you need to go stomp on all of them before they hatch, and then don't walk into the spikes that the third Lich throws out. You will also need to dodge the big skull that Katarina tries to chomp you with, and maybe most importantly of all, when she goes to slam her staff down on you, you need to bait those away from the middle of the room. That will give you the most amount of space to then deal with all of the other mechanics that exist in the fight. Alright, and now for what I consider the hardest boss of all 5 tier 17s, Abomination. This map has very cramped hallways. It's probably the most dangerous map. It's not really that annoying to navigate around. It's not a bad maze or anything, and like it looks fine. It's just very, very tight and claustrophobic and dangerous. The boss is a combination of Malagaro, Doedre, and Chevron, and when you kill one, the others heal to full, so you want to kill all 3 to trigger phase 2. I prefer to keep Chevron alive. She's probably the most dangerous of the 3, but she has the easiest spells to see, so dodging her is easier for me than either of the other 2. Because of that, I like to focus Malagaro first. He is the hardest to see, then Doedre, and then I save Shav for last. Now, Doedre summons debuff pylons when she dies. I try to cleave Shav and the debuff pylons at the same time, and if your build has a lot of damage, that shouldn't be too bad, but if you are struggling with damage, you can try killing Shav second and Doedre last. Either way, in Phase 2, you want to sidestep all of the orbs, constantly rotate around the boss, and really keep your eyes open for Malagaro's purple daggers that shoot up out of the ground. They are extremely deadly and hard to see, so like by far the most deceptively deadly mechanic in this fight. You really want to keep your eyes peeled for that. You also want to bait the big red orbs that they shoot at you out toward walls, toward corners of the room. Other than that, it pretty much is a fight where you're just sort of circling around the boss, hitting it for a few seconds, circling around the boss, hitting it for a few seconds, sidestepping over and over again. I generally find the second phase to be easier than the first. Okay, hopefully this helps with tier 17s. There have been a lot of complaints about tier 17 map mods, and justifiably so. With that being said, I do still think that the maps themselves are fun. I like the boss fights a lot, and I really enjoy the level of juicing that tier 17s provide. I also think that the nerfs that they made to the map's monsters, life, and health were actually pretty successful. Tier 17s are certainly not a perfect mechanic, but you gotta do them, and you should. They're very rewarding. Honestly, once you get a build up to the level that you can cruise through them without too much trouble, they are actually pretty fun. It's just a little bumpy ride getting to that point. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching, and good luck in tier 17s. Bye.